Imagine a plate of food that represents thousands of years of culture, family, and survival. For billions of people around the world, that plate is anchored by a mountain of white rice. It is the taste of home, the center of every gathering, and the foundation of an entire heritage. But what happens when the very food that sustained our ancestors starts quietly fueling a modern health crisis?
That is the ultimate paradox we are living in right now. We are taking an ancient carbohydrate-rich fuel source and pouring it into a modern, entirely sedentary engine. The result is a biological car crash. We are seeing an absolute explosion of metabolic syndrome and insulin resistance in populations that, historically, never had to worry about these issues. It is a fascinating, yet terrifying collision between our cultural history and our current biological reality.
It really is a collision. We are essentially eating like we are still spending 12 hours a day working in the fields, doing brutal manual labor. But the reality is, most of us are sitting behind desks, staring at screens, barely moving enough to elevate our heart rates. Yet, the rice cooker is still constantly on. Why is this specific mismatch so dangerous for our bodies?
To understand that, we have to look at the mechanics of insulin. When you consume a massive portion of refined carbohydrates, like a massive mound of white rice, you are hitting your system with a massive glycemic load. Your body rapidly breaks that down into glucose, flooding your bloodstream. In response, your pancreas panics and pumps out a massive wave of insulin to shuttle that sugar into your cells. If you do this once in a while, it is fine. But when you are doing it 3, 4, or 5 times a day, year after year, your cells eventually become deaf to the signal. They are completely full.
So, it is like trying to shove more clothes into an already bursting suitcase. The zipper is breaking. You are pushing down as hard as you can, but nothing else is going in. The sugar just gets trapped in the bloodstream.
That is a perfect analogy. And when that suitcase refuses to open, your body has to figure out what to do with all that excess energy. It cannot just leave the sugar in the blood, because high blood sugar is highly toxic. So, it converts that glucose into fat. But here is the critical twist, especially in Asian and South Asian populations. It does not just store it as the harmless, pinchable fat right under your skin. It stores it deep inside your abdomen, wrapping it tightly around your vital organs. We call this visceral fat.
Which leads us to one of the most deceptive and dangerous phenomena in modern health, the skinny fat illusion. I know so many people who look completely normal, maybe even thin, when they are wearing a t-shirt. They step on a scale, their BMI is well within the healthy range, and their doctors tell them they are fine. But metabolically, they are a complete disaster.
Exactly. The medical term for this is TOFI, thin on the outside, fat on the inside. It is incredibly insidious because it gives you a false sense of security. You think you are healthy because you do not look overweight by Western standards. But that visceral fat we just talked about? It is not just inert blubber. It is biologically active. It acts like a toxic organ, constantly pumping inflammatory cytokines into your system, driving up your blood pressure, and making your insulin resistance even worse. You are essentially carrying a metabolic time bomb right next to your liver and pancreas.
That is a chilling thought. You feel safe because you fit into a smaller pant size, but your internal organs are suffocating. And I imagine the traditional diet makes this even worse when we look at the other side of the equation, muscle mass. In so many of these traditional meals, protein is treated almost like a garnish. You have a massive plate of rice, some vegetables, and maybe a few tiny pieces of meat or tofu scattered on top.
You have hit on the second half of the crisis. Muscle is your body's metabolic sink. It is the largest consumer of glucose in your body. When you have a high carbohydrate diet combined with a severe lack of high-quality protein, you simply cannot build or maintain muscle. As we age, if we are not actively lifting weights and eating enough protein, we naturally lose muscle mass. So your metabolic sink is shrinking every single year, while the amount of sugar you are pouring into it stays exactly the same.
It is a recipe for a flood. The drain is getting smaller, but the faucet is still running at full blast. This makes me think about the psychological and cultural cost of trying to fix this. Food is deeply emotional. In many cultures, serving a massive plate of rice is how a mother says, "I love you." If we tell people they need to drastically cut back on their traditional staple, it feels like we are telling them to reject their heritage. How do we navigate that? Are we asking billions of people to just abandon their culture?
Not at all. And that is where we have to bridge the gap between clinical reality and sustainable living. Telling an entire culture to stop eating rice is not just arrogant, it is destined to fail. Instead, we have to talk about architectural changes to the plate and the timing of how we eat. We do not need to eliminate the culture. We need to outsmart the biology.
I love that framing. Outsmarting the biology instead of fighting the culture. So, what does that actually look like on a Tuesday night at the family dinner table?
It starts with flipping the script on proportions. Historically, rice was the canvas, and everything else was just the paint. We need to reverse that. High-quality protein and fibrous vegetables must become the centerpieces of the meal, and the rice becomes the side dish. But even more powerful than the proportions is the sequence in which you eat the food. This is a game changer that requires zero cultural sacrifice.
You are talking about eating the fiber and protein first, before touching the carbohydrates. I have read about this. It sounds almost too simple to be true. Does the order of the food really make that much of a difference to our hormones?
It makes a staggering difference. Think of fiber as a biological sponge. When you eat a large portion of fibrous vegetables first, it coats the lining of your stomach and upper intestine, creating a viscous mesh. Then, you eat your protein and fats, which trigger satiety hormones. By the time you finally eat the rice, that carbohydrate hits the fibrous mesh. The breakdown of the starches is dramatically slowed down. Instead of a massive, violent spike in blood sugar and insulin, you get a slow, gentle, rolling hill.
It is like putting a massive speed bump on the highway, right before the glucose hits the bloodstream. You still get to eat the rice, you still get to enjoy the meal with your family, but your pancreas does not have to go into a state of absolute panic.
Precisely. You are manipulating your internal biochemistry without giving up the joy of the meal. Another incredibly effective tool for these populations is narrowing the eating window. In cultures where constant snacking is the norm, where you have morning tea with biscuits, a heavy lunch, afternoon snacks, and a late dinner, your insulin is literally turned on 24 hours a day.
Your body never gets a chance to rest. It is constantly in storage mode, packing away fat, and never once flipping the switch to burn it.
Exactly. By implementing intermittent fasting, even something as simple as only eating between noon and 8 in the evening, you are giving your pancreas a vacation. For those 14 or 16 hours of fasting, insulin levels plummet. When insulin drops, the suitcase finally unlocks. Your body realizes there is no food coming in, so it reaches into those visceral fat stores for energy. It is a profound physiological reset.
It is fascinating how we can use the absence of food as a therapeutic tool. It forces the body to clean house. But I want to push back on one thing. With the rise of modern medications, specifically the new class of GLP-1 drugs, people are seeing miraculous weight loss without necessarily changing their diets. Is there a danger that people will just use these medications to keep eating massive amounts of refined carbs, ignoring the muscle loss and the skinny fat trap?
That is the most pressing question in metabolic medicine right now. These medications are undeniably revolutionary. They essentially rewire the brain's appetite center and improve insulin secretion. But they are not a substitute for the laws of thermodynamics or human physiology. If you take a GLP-1 medication, lose 30 pounds, but continue eating a low-protein, high-carbohydrate diet, a massive percentage of that weight loss will be your precious muscle tissue.
Which brings us right back to the shrinking metabolic sink. You might weigh less on the scale, but you have actually made your body weaker and more susceptible to insulin resistance in the long run if you ever stop the medication.
Exactly. You become a smaller, weaker version of your metabolically unhealthy self. The medication is a bridge, not a destination. It can silence the food noise and give your body a chance to heal, but you still have to walk across that bridge by eating adequate protein and engaging in resistance training. If you do not send a signal to your body that your muscles are required for survival, your body will happily burn them away for energy.
It all comes down to the signals we are sending our biology, whether it is through the order we eat our food, the hours we choose to fast, or the heavy weights we lift. We are constantly communicating with our cells. And for so long, the modern traditional diet has been sending a signal of permanent winter preparation. Store fat, save energy, prepare for a famine that never actually arrives.
That is a beautiful way to put it. We are victims of our own evolutionary success. Our bodies are perfectly designed to survive a world of scarcity, but we have built a world of absolute abundance. The hyper-processed, hyper-milled white rice we eat today is not even the same food our ancestors ate 100 years ago. It has been stripped of its nutrients and fiber to increase shelf life. We have industrialized our comfort food.
So the true path forward is not about abandoning who we are. It is about demanding a higher standard for how we treat our bodies within the context of our culture. It is about waking up to the reality that just because our grandparents ate a certain way does not mean we can survive doing the same, simply because our environments are entirely alien to theirs.
It requires a profound level of self-awareness. We have to be willing to look at our daily habits, the hidden sugars in our sauces, the massive portions of starches, the lack of physical strain on our muscles, and ask ourselves if we are willing to evolve. The tools are all there. Food sequencing, fasting, prioritizing protein, building metabolic flexibility. We just have to be brave enough to apply them.
It is a radical act of self-care to question the norm, especially when the norm is served on a dinner plate every single night. We have to respect our history, but we have to respect our biology even more. Because at the end of the day, a culture can only thrive if the people living it are actually healthy enough to pass it on.
I could not agree more. The future of health is not about finding a magic pill that lets us ignore reality. It is about understanding the magnificent, complex machinery of our own bodies and giving it exactly what it needs to thrive in a modern world.
Which leaves us with a powerful question to ponder. Are you going to let your environment dictate your biology, or are you going to take the wheel and dictate how your body responds to the world? Think about that the next time you sit down for a meal. Look at your plate, look at the proportions, and ask yourself what signal you are about to send to your cells. Next time, we are going to dive into the hidden world of sleep, stress, and how cortisol is secretly undermining all your efforts to get healthy. Until then, stay curious and keep questioning the metabolic truth.